As I mentioned in part one, there were two people who were willing to come onto my channel and discuss the men's rights movement. This is the second interview.
I've spent my life pushing myself to be the strongest, and now I learn there's a power level I'll never reach on my own. And I hate that.
In today's episode, I'm joined by Janet Bloomfield, who goes by the name of JudgyBitch. And you blog about men's rights issues, and you've been contributing to A Voice for Men, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. My first question is, because I've seen some of the things that you posted, and I just want to get your take of what you think the feminist movement is, and what they get right and what they get wrong.
Okay, well, I'm old enough to remember when feminism was really about empowering women, that it was about opening up opportunities, that culturally we were pretty bad at taking really talented, ambitious women and giving them a chance to fulfill those ambitions. Now, in actual fact, most women aren't talented and ambitious, and they're extremely happy to be at home taking care of their children, taking care of their families. They want to work part-time. Work-life balance is incredibly important to most women. But there's a small percentage that's super ambitious, super talented. They just want to get out there and grab the world. And culturally, we weren't good at opening up space for these women. Feminism really helped to do that, to say if you are Sheryl Sandberg, if you do want to be the CEO, if you do want to be an astronaut, if your whole entire life is just wrapped up in this passion for whatever, we want to make room in the culture for you, and at the same time, we want to respect and we want to provide opportunities for women who have different ambitions, who aren't interested in working, who aren't interested in being corporate slaves, who want to be at home with their kids. So the original goal of feminism, as I understood it, was to have both, to have complete and total respect for wives and mothers, as we used to, and to make room and have respect for ambitious women who wanted just more than being a wife and a mother. And we wanted to see respect for both of those things. What I think happened with feminism is that it lost complete and total respect for women who are mothers, for women who are more interested in children and family and home and having balance. And it started to try and cram all women into this box of being lean in, being ambitious, being corporate, imitating the very highest elite group of men. And there wasn't any room in culture anymore for balance. And then it just like tripped. Feminism tripped and fell smack on its face. And women went from being powerful to being pathetic. They went from being strong to being fragile and needing trigger warnings and being so incapable of handling the slightest bit of disagreement that they need fainting couches. And all of a sudden we have this Victorian idea of women as trembling, fragile, pathetic little creatures who must be protected from everything all the time. And for most women, I think they're looking at this kind of feminism and saying, fuck no, no thank you. This is not what we signed up for. We signed up for Xena Princess Warrior. I mean, it's like Ripley with her flamethrower, right? She's doing everything she can to protect Newt. Stay away from her, you bitch. And now we've transferred into, I'm sorry, Ripley can't leave the aircraft because she's frightened of some bad words. Someone chalked the word Trump, and now she doesn't know how to use a flamethrower. It's like who wants this kind of feminism? It seems to be this tiny little small group of minority of women competing to see who can be the biggest fucking loser. And I don't want any part of that. Most women don't want any part of that at all.
Okay. Well, what examples have you, because I've seen you post about Harvard's recent idea of getting rid of all male clubs. Is that an example of the feminist movement going awry? Like, what examples do you see it happening in our society?
Absolutely. And I suspect that Drew, maybe I'm wrong, but I suspect that Drew has done this absolutely on purpose. That the proposition was initially tabled as all male clubs. And then initially they tried to make the all male clubs accept women, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when only two clubs agreed to do that and the rest said, no thanks, we're happy just being a bunch of guys hanging out together, then all of a sudden the all-male clubs were attacked as being something that promotes rape culture, something where men go in to get trained in how to rape and sexually assault women. I mean, if that's true, then why would you have pushed women into those clubs? Like it's just a steaming pile of bullshit is what it is. That is not what they're objecting to. What they're objecting to is the fact that men will get together and promote each other's interests very well collectively. They'll do that in a really functional way, and men have always been able to do that. You put a whole group of women together and it just turns into a backstabbing bitch fest where they all try to compete on who is the biggest victim, and they'll turn on each other, boom, in a heartbeat. So I think Drew very cleverly put this through as an attack on all male clubs, and then once the motion was agreed to, then pointed out that Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender. So this means that all single gender clubs, including sororities, including all women groups, gender groups, are going to also face the same kind of restrictions. I think it was a stroke of genius, or unfortunately, Harvard's president is just as dumb as all of these feminists, which I doubt. I doubt that very much. I think that Drew just pulled off a brilliant coup to show feminists exactly how hypocritical they are. And this idea that some women have marginalized voices, this simply isn't true. This is nonsense. Gender doesn't tell you anything about what kind of power a person has in society. You can't make any argument that I am an affluent, white woman who doesn't have to work. I am well off enough to be able to stay at home. There is no argument to be made that a homeless black male veteran who's disabled has privilege over me on the basis of gender. Bullshit. No, he doesn't. He has no privilege of any kind over me. I am entirely the one with privilege.
My next question focuses on the catcalling piece that was put out about in 2014, where a woman showed herself getting hit on by a bunch of men in New York City for 10 hours. I think that that's a great example of what the feminist movement has become, which is just, we focus on the few bad apples, explode on that, or just like sensationalize it. And if a guy does the same thing in the sense of putting up a video where he gets rejected by a bunch of females, that just gets ignored because it doesn't matter to them. Is that how you see the feminist movement at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have to resort to propaganda in order to make their points. And not only was that Hollaback video 12 hours in New York, not only was it edited in a completely misleading way, it was completely and utterly racist too. I mean, they spent most of the time is video edited from a couple blocks in Harlem, I believe. And they just took all of these, the lowest, the men who are lowest on the social ladder, which is mostly poor black men who don't have, and Hispanic men who don't have the kind of assets that typically attract women. Now, if you went to, say, a rich area of Harlem, or where there's lots of rich black men, I guarantee you that woman wouldn't have objected in any way to those men commenting on her physical appearance. And most of them didn't even comment on her physical appearance. They said hello. They just fucking said hello. So men are in this impossible double bind that you are required to move first. I think I can link you to a study that shows that upwards of 90% of women prefer men to make the first move socially. They don't really want to take on the psychological burden of rejection, right? Jane Austen has a very famous line in one of her novels that men have the privilege of choosing and women have the privilege of refusing. And psychologically, that's a nice place to be in. I mean, it takes a lot. I don't think a lot of women understand that all men are under pressure to work up the guts to go and present themselves to women with the possibility of being rejected. Like, no, I don't want to go out with you. No, I reject you. No, I want nothing to do with you. And what women are looking for typically is money. Most women still insist on dating or marrying or having relationships with men who are more financially successful than they are. Women don't look down. Men very commonly do, it doesn't matter, but women typically don't. So men at the lowest end of the socioeconomic ladder, the ones on the bottom rung, still have to move first, and they don't have anything to offer women. This comes out very frequently as a kind of aggressive pursuit on the street. It's almost like they're mocking the fact, like they understand they're going to be rejected, so they turn it into a game, and they turn it into, it's almost like there is a little bit of malevolence and anger there, but it's perfectly understandable, and it doesn't come from the fact that men just hate women. I think this is men expressing their frustration at being stuck in that bind. See, here's the key thing about feminism. It's taken away all of the obligations from women. All the traditional gender obligations from women have been torn up and removed. Most of the gender obligations for men are still in place. You are still expected to behave like traditional men while women just do whatever the hell they want. That's not equality.
You know, I don't want to take too much of a position on this, but I gotta say that I do agree with you, especially coming from a minority standpoint. That definitely touched a nerve, and I can agree with that, your point. But I do want to focus on the men's side for a minute, because, we're not perfect either. So just give me your take on the men's rights movement, what they get right and what they get wrong.
Yeah. The men's rights movement has developed enough at this point to actually be able to separate it into different factions. Now, I discovered the whole entire men's rights movement after I was married and after I had children. So the entire pickup artist community, I wasn't even aware that it was out there for the longest time. That I wasn't coming in as someone who was dating. Like, I was already in an established long-term relationship. So there is the pickup artist section of men's rights, which is single men trying to deal with a legal environment that is way stacked against them, and relations between the sexes that really haven't changed, that women have certain expectations of men that are based on traditional masculine stereotypes that they're not willing to let go of. It can be a very, very fraught and difficult environment for men to get through. And as you say, not all men are perfect. Some are socially awkward. Some are completely unaware of what the legal environment is like. Some of them are maybe assholes. I mean, there's lots of women who are assholes too. But the consequences for being an asshole if you are a guy are pretty high. They're pretty severe. And the consequences of being an asshole if you're a woman are basically non-existent. Nothing happens to you. So there's that section of men's rights. There's the one in the center, which is sort of where I am, which is really looking at the legal environment, that we want legal things to be put in place, men to have legal rights that women have and they don't. Things like the right to consent to genital mutilation. You can't cut a baby girl's genitals for any reason. And to say that, oh, well, female genital mutilation is just so much more brutal than male genital mutilation. That's like saying it's okay to cut off a baby's toe because cutting off the baby's foot would be so much worse. That's just not an argument, right? You either have the right to bodily autonomy, bodily integrity, and your parents' tribal and religious beliefs don't matter, or they do. And right now, in the legal environment, girls are protected, boys are not. The whole argument around the draft. For the longest time, it was men are drafted. You are in the US, you will sign your draft card at age 18. It will be in effect until you are 26 years of age. If you refuse to do that, you can lose the right to vote. And, as an aside, the 26th Amendment to the US Constitution directly linked the right to vote to the draft, from which women are exempt. Women really didn't care about it. Whatever, doesn't apply to me. Now, the military has thrown all combat positions open to women. The draft fills combat positions specifically. There's no reason. There's absolutely no reason now that women shouldn't be subjected to the draft. But now all of a sudden you're seeing feminists say, oh, no, that's not the equality we're interested in. Or nobody should be drafted. See, now that women are subject to it, nobody should be drafted. But the legal environment right now, you have to go and die. I don't. That's not equality. It's just not. 50-50, shared parenting. Feminist organizations have thrown money into defeating every single shared parenting bill in North America. Not one jurisdiction has a shared parenting bill. It is consistently opposed. Now, the National Organization for Women pours money into literally opposing opposing legal equality. There was recently just an article in the Daily Mail about women talking about the terrible torture of being a 50-50 custody mom, how terrible that is for women. And yet it's been, since the beginning of divorce, we've been doing this to men without giving one fuck about how they feel. Courts will turn dads into weekend dads who get to see their kids, 40 hours a month and not say anything about it. Feminists have never cared. They've literally opposed equality. So I'm in that silo of men's rights. We want to be legally equal under the law, period. End of story. And if we're not going to be, then my argument is women shouldn't vote. If you are not interested in actual, literal, legal equality, then you should have absolutely no say in how those laws are made. That is my position. I have quite a few videos on YouTube discussing various manifestations of that. But essentially, if women aren't going to agree to be drafted, I don't think they have any right to decide to pick leaders who are potentially going to send men into war. It's not your blood. It's not your body. It's not your say. And I don't think that women ever will agree to be drafted. They shouldn't vote.
Okay, I can respect that. That's a pretty strong position, but I can respect that. My next question is going to pertain to the strongest argument that I believe the feminist movement has, which is equal pay issues and glass ceilings when it comes to careers. Do you see those two things as an issue, particularly the wage gap? Just give me your thoughts on that.
It's absolutely not an issue, and I'm going to give you absolute proof of that in two different ways. First of all, it's in the logic of capitalism itself. If you could get the exact same work out of a worker and pay them 33% less, nobody would hire men. There is not a wage gap. There is an hours worked gap. Here's another piece of proof. I have not held a paying job for my entire adult life. For 15 years, I have not earned a wage, and yet I am counted in wage gap statistics. They will count me as someone who is oppressed, first of all, by the fact that I get to sit home and do whatever the fuck I want. Yeah, that's real. That's oppression. That's terrible. Oh my goodness. I'm just so oppressed. My life is terrible. That's ridiculous. I haven't worked for 15 years, and they will count me in their wage gap statistics. They do not take into account women's different choices. They'll say things like, okay, women doctors get paid less than male doctors. Women doctors typically work part-time. They're actually destroying nationalized healthcare systems in both Canada and the UK. These women simply refuse to work. What they do is go to medical school. Half of doctors marry other doctors. Then they don't work at all when they have very little children, and they only work part-time for most of their career. Medical school is now basically just an elite dating service for female doctors. They don't work as much as men. Of course they get paid less. Even more interesting, when you break it down into fees paid per service, women actually make slightly more per service that they bill a medical system for. So how are you going to measure this? Per service, women get paid more. But they work maybe 1/10 the hours of men. Obviously, men get paid considerably more. There's no wage gap. If corporations could save 33% of their human resources bill by simply hiring women and get the same work at the same quality, why would they hire men?
Well, the only thing that I would wonder about that is that something that is never been the wage gap, or in your opinion, is that something it's never been?
I think the legislation was passed sometime in the 1960s that made it illegal to pay men and women different wages for the same work. So, for example, if you hired a telephone, someone to answer the telephone, a receptionist who was a woman, you couldn't legally pay that woman less than a male receptionist simply because she was a woman. That has been illegal since the 1960s. It has been illegal for a really long time. If you go to Forbes magazine and look for an article called Opting Out, the New American Dream, Forbes magazine surveyed 3,500 working mothers and asked them if they could stay at home, would they prefer to do that? Would they quit their jobs and stay at home if they could financially afford to do so, meaning they could maintain their lifestyle? Everyone can financially afford it. It just means you have to give up certain things. The percentage of women who said that they aspired to be stay-at-home moms, 84%. The overwhelming majority. And 1/3 of those 84% of women who would rather be at home, they fucking hate being at work. It sucks. It's a bullshit myth that was peddled to them. Oh, you're going to find a cubicle so much more interesting and fulfilling than being at home with your children. It's a lie. 84% of women don't want to be there. Absolutely not. They would rather be at home. And 1/3 of those women, they resented men for not being able to take care of them. They said they resented their husbands because they couldn't stay at home. But guess what? It's not your husband who sold you on this bullshit story about how much happier you were going to be paying some other woman a shitty wage to raise your children while you sit in a cubicle. It wasn't men who did that. It was feminism. Feminism sold you on that story. Don't blame men. Understand who the real enemy is here. It's not men. Men didn't ask for the family wage to be destroyed. Men didn't ask to be kicked out of the lives of their wives and children. Men didn't ever ask for this. Feminists asked for this. There's a very good I can't remember, C.K. Chesterton maybe. There's this odd idea that going to a corporation and working for a boss who can fire you at any moment for any reason is freedom. This is freedom for women, the ability to do that. But working at home for the man and the children that you love, to take care of the family, doing that simply because you love them, that's slavery. I mean, that's fucked up. It's actually the opposite. It's completely the opposite. And if you want to know where that switched in our culture, where that change came from, it came from Betty Friedan. It came from those early feminists from the 1960s and 70s onwards through the 80s.
You know, I don't know if I can get on board with the idea that women naturally want to just stay home and take care of the kids, because I personally know women who want to pursue careers where they're independent, you know, and you know, they want to take care of their kids, but they also want to have a life outside of that. So, you know, I totally agree with, you know, feminism just ignoring the privileges that women have and only focusing on the negative at the expense of men included. But, you know, I don't know if I can see women in general saying, you know what, we just want to stay home and be a housewife. And for the most part.
The Forbes survey suggests that they do, and often they don't know it until they actually have children. It's an experience that you really can't replicate, and I have a big problem with feminism lying to young women about this. It's not that I don't want women who really are happy to just take the baby, hand it to the nanny, hand it to daycare, go to work, they're delighted, they love it. I don't think that those women should be shamed. They shouldn't be made to feel bad, but they are a tiny percentage of women. The overwhelming majority from the Forbes survey, 84% of those women bought that story. Yes, I'm going to go and I'm going to get all these skills and I'm going to land in one of these great Fortune 500 companies, and I'm going to be thrilled and it's going to be amazing. And then they have a baby. They have a baby and they've got, what, 6 weeks, 12 weeks maternity leave you guys have there? And at the end of 12 weeks, their lives are shattered. Their hearts are absolutely fucking shattered. And 84% of them wish that they were at home. That's an overwhelming majority. And you have to wonder, of the percentage that said they're okay with being at work, how many of them are they just can't face the truth. They can't possibly face the reality because it's too heartbreaking. And I think you would see the exact inverse. We just taught men that you don't have any ambition. You don't want to succeed in life. No, all you want to do is stay at home and you want to take that baby from your wife when she gives birth and you just want to be at home happily with the babies. I mean, I think there's a certain percentage of men who probably would flourish in that. They'd probably love it. Yeah, this is awesome. I'm just going to be super dad at home. This is great. I think you'd find 84% of men would make that choice. Yeah, sure, give me the baby. And they would fucking hate it, right? Because we have evolved into having particular psychologies. And a lot of feminists will throw hissy fits over evolutionary psychology, which is silly. You can't mock creationists for not accepting punctuated equilibrium theories of evolution and then turn around and say everything about humans is evolved except their psychologies. There's no evolution in the brain. That never happened. That's just a myth. That's nonsense. No, it's not. We have psychologies that have evolved over tens of thousands of years. And what feminism is trying to do is turn the apple cart over. And they've succeeded in doing that, but they have made women, men, and children bitterly, bitterly unhappy. I suspect most of the women you're talking to are 22. Go back and ask them when they're 32 and have a couple children how they feel.
That I'll give you. I think age definitely has something to do with feminism going down the way that it has. My last question pertains to gender relations. You know, with feminists and the MRA movement going on, you know, everybody's just pointing and shouting and saying, you're the guilty party. Can we get to a point where we can negotiate with the opposite gender, regardless of what gender we are, and, you know, just look to be happy instead of putting the blame on the opposite sex?
I hope so. And I think one of the key ways to doing that is to, in fact, create an environment in which men and women are legally equal under the law. You're never going to be able to change human nature, where most women don't actually want to be held responsible for like half the family's finances. They want to be at home with the children. They want all of these things. Under the law, we need to have perfect equality. So things like the rape statistics, that's another big one. It's nowhere even close to 1 in 5, as feminists claim. College campuses, Harvard does not have a rape culture that exceeds the rape in the Congo, where rape is used as a tool of war. It's absolute nonsense to say stuff like that. But you do have situations where men are being stripped of their due process rights on college campuses. Women can redefine virtually any sexual encounter as rape and just remain completely oblivious to the fact that, well, I'll use myself as an example. I have never once in my entire life have I ever asked a man for permission to have sex with him. The words, "May I place your penis in my mouth," have never come out of my mouth. I have never asked for consent. Am I a rapist? Does this mean that I have raped every man I've had sex with? I have sex with men who are asleep. My husband thinks that's kind of awesome. Under your campus codes, I'm a rapist. This kind of idiocy and silliness has got to be stripped out of the discourse. And the best way to do that is through a legal challenge. And those legal challenges are going on. In fact, I can't wait for the first Harvard MBA student who gets suspended from class for sexual assault, because holy fuck, his settlement's going to be huge. What are the lifetime earnings of a Harvard MBA student? And it will happen.
6 figures, obviously.
Yeah. Huge.
7.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's going to be massive. And so, you know, feminists have turned the culture into these huge, huge inequalities. We need legal responses to these. We need to bring the law in line with our ideals and then let people make their own choices, figure out their lives. You know, you would take something like divorce, right? 70% of divorces are initiated by women, mostly for really spurious reasons. Physical abuse is number 10 on the list of reasons why women file for divorce. It's more things like, oh, we grew apart, we don't communicate, we don't have the same goals, I'm not happy, this kind of stuff. Well, what if you knew? What if you knew that legally, under the law, you're equal to your husband? Moms and dads are absolutely equal. You are not walking away with custody of the children. You are not walking away with more than half of the family's assets. You're not walking away with the house. You are going to divide the care for the children and your assets equally under the law. What impact would that have on divorce rates?
It would make men's lives a lot easier knowing that getting divorced doesn't necessarily mean that they'll end up on the street. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's such a perfect expression of female privilege in our society, and the fact that it's men who don't have rights. That any man who stands at the altar and says, I do, is facing exactly that. You just bet half your stuff and your children that she won't cheat on you. That's a big bet to take.
Yeah.
And the law is what is going to fix that.
Yeah.
And just sending messages like everyone has to sign a draft card, men and women. You are all equally responsible for the protection of liberty in your country. It's a mental mindset thing, right? Like, you have had to accept that. All American men have had to accept that. You get a draft card and you better sign it. And that's even more poignant for men of color, who are often the first ones drafted to get thrown into the cannon. So you can't get away from the awareness of your responsibility as a man to lay down your life for your country. Women want to be equal to men. All right, ladies, sign that fucking card. You sign it and you live from 18 to 26 with the knowledge that you can be sent to die. And if you don't want to do that, then shut up about equality. You are interested in privilege, and fuck you. Our whole society is done with your privileges. We want equality.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can check out part 1 of this mini-series on the top right of this video, or you can just go ahead and subscribe.